It's an honour to be on your podcast.
It's
a very deep question.
And I remember on my first day of reception, I walked in and the teachers asked me, what do you want to get out of your school experience? And my only response was, I want to be on stage. Finding opportunities, finding casting calls, preparing tapes, all of that kind of thing, and obviously networking. For me, it was never about fame or fortune or money. It was always about, I moved to Switzerland, formative age where I suddenly didn't have that many friends around me, lost everyone. Almost a sense of abandonment. I did get bullied, the most expensive school in the world. And so you can imagine the kind of kids that were there. I felt pretty excluded there. I would feel embarrassed about my background, which is insane. But I wrote a full-length book when I was like 14.
So I actually wrote another book during COVID because I've always been in toxic relationships. And it's the first time I've been in a healthy relationship. I'd had all of these horrible experiences. People fundamentally are romantic. I mean, nobody seeks out a toxic relationship, right?
Toxic patterns such as love bombing, especially people with like low self-esteem or anxiety or insecure attachment type. It's a dystopian.
This is a tough one.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. I've just started my full-time work in London, having been on the desk for a few days, and already a bit overwhelmed by work, but I'm enjoying the learning, the people, the discipline, and just, a lot to be excited for. This is basically the first weekend where it's particularly nice to get a coffee with my guests, and we're enjoying a latte in my new flat here in central London, which is wonderful. I feel very blessed that we're now approaching 100,000 podcast downloads. Please know that I don't take any of your time, feedback and support for granted, because when I started this passion project podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge, I was genuinely motivated by 3 founding ideals. Number 1, purpose of giving. Number 2, learning from others. And number 3, sharing of stories. These 3 aspirations still make up the content description for every single episode. Indeed, the opportunities to strive to give my courageous and insightful guests legacy-worthy interviews over coffee, tea, bubble tea, water, juice, or whatever it is, despite my many inadequacies, have been a tremendous privilege that imbues me with gratitude. I know that I will listen and look back to laugh at how naive I am. But if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you, and please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me via my Linktree, David Quan. Seeing this podcast on people's Spotify Wraps or receiving positive messages about the guests give me tremendous fulfillment. I cannot thank my wonderful guests enough for their courage and insights. I genuinely maintain the deep conviction that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning, and sharing, is a worthwhile pursuit. So now on to my incredibly talented, thoughtful, and important guest. Shaira Berg is a British actress and writer. She is of Indian and European descent and has been cast in several film and television productions throughout her life. Born in England, she grew up between Switzerland and the United Kingdom. Berg made her professional writing debut in 2018 when she co-wrote and starred in the award-nominated film American Fantasy. Alongside acting and writing, she studied at the University of Manchester, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology 2017 to 2020, and is studying for a PhD in psychology at the University of Cambridge Trinity College from 2021 onwards. I will just add that she got first class honours for her bachelor's degree, which she is too humble to including there. Shaira is making her off-West End writing and acting debut with her play Gaslight. Shaira, welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and it's great to be able to talk to you about what I've been doing, what I've been getting up to, sort of how I've come to this position that I'm in now, and everything that's led me to this point.
Amazing. I'm super excited to learn, as we were saying just before. It's very ironic that it's Shaira, because I feel like you're anything but shy.
Yeah, I did get that a lot when I was in primary school, because I started acting when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I remember I was a very shy child and my parents sort of encouraged me to try acting, and it was always something that I was interested in. And I remember on my first day of reception, I walked in and the teachers asked me, so like, what do you want to get out of your school experience? Are you excited for school? And my only response was, I want to be on stage. So that was sort of the starting point of me realizing that I had this passion for acting, and I've just been pursuing it ever since, alongside studying, which has always been really important to my parents for me to do as well.
So at the very beginning then, how much of it was coincidence of stumbling into an acting opportunity?
So in the beginning, I never see sort of, because the acting industry is so difficult and so fickle, I never find it, I mean, it is a lot of luck, but I think in terms of like stumbling into opportunity, the opportunities are created for yourself. And I think in the beginning, it was really just school productions and, you know, the opportunity to act within a smaller community. And then once I started doing that, I realized that I really liked it and I wanted to do it more professionally. And I was really young and I was sort of begging my parents to get me an agency, and I started going to acting classes and, you know, started to work on the craft. And then I mean, it is really difficult to get opportunities. So every time that I did, I was just very grateful that there was a chance for me to act. And that was sort of what drove my passion this whole time. It's just sort of, you know, the opportunities come and I'm grateful that it's a chance for me to actually have the opportunity to act and be in something. It doesn't matter what it is. But you do have to seek out your own opportunities, and it's so much work with, you know, finding a good agent and finding opportunities, finding casting calls, preparing tapes, all of that kind of thing. And obviously networking is a huge part of it as well.
So what did your parents do, and did they actively have a acting or drama interest?
So my parents are both professors. My mum went to Oxford and my dad went to Cambridge. So they sort of wanted me to be an academic because they thought that was, you know, the best thing that you could do with your career. And I did agree because, I mean, growing up in an academic household, I was around that sort of environment, and so I was very interested in academia. And my mum is also an author alongside being a professor, and so she was very interested in the arts in terms of sort of, you know, writing and also...
What are their area?
So my mum is a professor of Chinese culture and literature.
Oh, wow.
And my dad is a professor of psychology. So, yeah, I think I sort of fell into the academic path as my second career because of my parents' encouragement, which I'm very grateful for. But
I was going to say it's a good backup, but also I can imagine that your academic studies and the training and the insights you get there would help your acting.
Yeah, so...
Complementary?
Definitely complementary. I think also opportunity-wise, so being in a university environment means that you're exposed to a lot more opportunity in terms of the arts because, you know, that's fostered alongside academic pursuits. And so because of that, I think it was definitely a good way to balance the two and to have both options. And obviously because my parents had experience with going through the academic track, I sort of understood what that would mean and what that would be like. And
what would it mean?
So I think it's more the fact that it's an opportunity to sort of develop sort of the skills of, you know, thinking about research and, you know, like reading a lot and interpreting things quickly and, you know, sort of like researching, I guess, as a whole, is a very useful skill for a lot of different disciplines. And especially for acting, and I mean, understanding scripts, you know, networking, all of that, the skills in academia that have linked to that have helped me. But I'm not really sure where I'm going to go in the future. And I think I've sort of, you know, just kind of fallen down the academic path a little bit because I didn't really want to get, you know, a real job. And I obviously do enjoy my degree a lot. So, yeah, I suppose I just pursued it because that was what I was good at.
So let's pull it back to, you know, primary school again, when you were just starting, realising your interest, and obviously as kids at that age, we'll get more or less more freedom to just follow our instincts and intuition. What were your kind of first roles or opportunities where you really got to act out of your character then, if that makes sense?
So when I was really young, I was doing mostly stage. So it was a lot of those very typical productions, you know, like The Wizard of Oz and Narnia and, you know, that kind of thing, those, like, kiddie productions. And so there was a lot of characters in those that I'd be cast as that were nothing like myself. And I think that's the first time that I realised what it was like to embody someone else's emotions, because as a child it's kind of hard to understand that. And I think when you're especially when you're very young and, you know, you play pretend and you're on the playground and everything's so vivid and so real, it makes acting very easy.
Yeah.
So I almost feel like as a child I was so immersed in the roles I was playing because I had this vivid imagination that you just have when you're that young. And so it was just so exciting to have an environment where I could do that, and where it felt real, because, you know, you have all these props and all these other actors that are bouncing off you, and you can just really immerse yourself and you can let your imagination run wild. And I think that childlike desire to sort of play pretend is something that's continued throughout my life through acting.
Yeah.
And I've always been able to re-access that, which I think is really special, because I think a lot of people grow up and they sort of forget that that's still possible.
Absolutely. And what were 2 or 3 common feedback that you got in your early acting career?
So, common feedback. I mean, I was told that I was a lot more confident on stage than I was in real life at that time. Because
That's
I think
a good
people
sign.
I think people were surprised, because I'd go on stage and I'd just become this other person, and I'd be so loud and, you know, bold, and then I'd be so shy and small.
I'm sure you now
outside
know
of
the
that.
psychology theory behind why.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, so I think that was something that I was definitely told. And then also because the town that I grew up in was quite small, I think the pool of actors was also quite small. And so I did get sort of an overinflated sense that I would be successful.
You're like a
very
big fish in
early
a small pond.
Yeah, not necessarily, because I mean there were
But you
there
didn't
were people
realise
that
it
were
was a
good.
small
Yeah,
pond.
exactly. So I didn't realise just how vast the industry is and how difficult it is to really make a name for yourself. So I sort of thought, you know, if I continue doing this can be my career, and that's that. And, you know, I'll go to drama school if I have to.
Hollywood and
yeah.
the rest, yeah.
I mean, for me, it was never about fame or fortune or money. It was always about, I mean, I still say this to this day. To me, success as an actor means that I can do that and sustain myself to, like, eat and live on acting. That would be success to me. And that was always the goal. So I always thought I would just want that to be my job, basically.
That's wonderful. I mean, I've never probably reached anything at the height that you have got with acting, but having played basketball at a relatively high level, you know, for South Australia and everything, I understand that for anything of excellence, there's a lot of sacrifice that's involved in time and energy and effort, in the way that you eat, perhaps, in the way you balance your studies. So in school, do you want to just paint a picture of what your schedule looked like, and how did you make choices about what to do or what not to do?
Yeah, so it was interesting because when I was younger, so say primary school all the way up until about year 7, I had grown up between Durham and Nottingham. And so I was in an environment that was English speaking, and there was a lot of acting opportunity for me. But because I was so young, the productions weren't really interfering with my school life. I was doing school productions as well, and it was mostly sort of in the summer or school holidays that I would then go and, you know, do acting jobs. And so I never really felt an interference as a child. And then when I was in year 7, my parents moved to Switzerland. And so when I moved to Switzerland, it was this German-speaking environment, and my mum is German, so I could speak German. I'm bilingual, but not to the same level that I can speak English, of course, because that, you know, was my first language. So when I moved to Switzerland, I felt so stuck with acting because there was no opportunity for me there. And so I spent about 4 years in Switzerland just doing absolutely no acting.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I did a little bit, sort of like drama groups.
In retrospect,
that kind of thing.
did that stunt your growth, or was that also helpful to have a bit of a break?
I think it did. I think one of the tricks with the acting industry is get in young. Because if you get in young,
you're way more likely to get a good agent because you don't need the experience or the training because you're a child.
Yep.
And, you know, if you can act as a child, the chances are you will be working.
4 years is quite a long time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I felt so lost during that time.
And you did feel like that, I'm missing something.
Yes, 100%. I think that
How old were you from the 4 years?
So I moved to Switzerland when I was, I think, 12.
Okay, so
11
from
or
12 to 16.
12 to 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was quite a golden...
It was difficult, yeah, because, I mean, I had my friends in the UK, and I moved to Switzerland at that, you know, formative age where I suddenly didn't have that many friends around me, and, you know, it was a completely different language, different environment, and I started off in a Swiss school, so it was in German, and I was always academically, I mean, my academics were always sort of one of my strengths, and then I moved to Switzerland and suddenly I have to do everything in German, and I'm struggling in school as well because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like how do I do maths in German, which is surprisingly hard. And so yeah, moving to Switzerland, I just sort of felt like I was missing something socially, and I mean that was my passion and I couldn't do it, and so I did feel really lost, and I think that contributed to me not being happy in Switzerland, and that's why I eventually moved back. I mean, I actually went to boarding school at 16 back in the UK because I was like, I can't do this. Like, I need to go back to the UK, and, you know, this is where I need to be, so.
So you moved to Switzerland because of parents' work?
Yes. So my mum got a professorship at the University of St. Gallen, and so we moved.
They're still there?
Yeah, they are, yeah. And so at 16, I sort of decided, I think I'm old enough to, you know, move back. And so I did, and that was honestly one of the best decisions I made. And then it took another 2 years to really get back into the industry because I was obviously in sixth form. So, you know, I did a little bit of drama at school, but to really get back in the industry, it took until I was 18.
That's really fascinating how, you know, when you move, it's a new environment, new set of people, almost everything that you've done before doesn't really, in that sense, matter anymore because they don't really know about your past, which can be advantage or disadvantage. Your identity from before the move versus, you know, 1 year in, how did it change, and was it just a significant period of reevaluation of what the world is actually like? And
yeah, I think because I was so young, I sort of had a rosy picture of what life was before I moved, and I don't think I realised what it was actually like to be in an environment where you didn't feel comfortable or, you know, it just didn't feel like home. And so I moved to Switzerland and I've suddenly not got my friends around me, not doing as well in school as I was. I don't have, I mean, the primary school I was at was incredible, and they fostered my interest in drama so well, and they, you know, really pushed me academically and in the extracurriculars to really achieve what I wanted to achieve. And I was suddenly in Switzerland and I just didn't feel any of that.
Why was there no drama opportunity? You would think that school plays, productions or clubs or theatre would be quite universal.
Yeah, well, interestingly, so they didn't do anything within the school, except sort of like church plays every now and then. And so, funnily enough, I would then audition for those church plays because that was all there was. And they wouldn't cast me because I would make people laugh too much because I would, like, really overdo it. You know, I would really just, like, perform. Yeah. And they were like, no.
So you're, like, over-dramatic.
Exactly. And they were like, we need to be subtle. You know, it's a church. We need to, we need to be calm. And I remember it was sort of like this Christmas play, and I'd auditioned, and the audition, like, everyone was watching. And they were sort of, you know, everyone was, like, cracking up, and they were like, oh, this is great, like, we didn't know you could act. And I was like, yeah, having a great time. It's the first time I've been able to act in a year, like, yeah, like, cast me. And then they cast, like, someone who just says the lines and, you know, stands there, so it's, you know, nice and modest. And so it was stuff like that, because Switzerland's very conservative, so I think that was just, maybe it was the time, because, I mean, that was, what, like, 2013, which is not that long ago, but also it was very small town Switzerland. And then there was a theatre school, so for like youth theatre in my town in Switzerland. And so I did join that, but it was all in German. And I just felt like I wasn't able to express myself in the same way because I had to think about the words and translating my sentences in my head before sort of knowing how I wanted to interpret lines. And so it was more difficult. I didn't feel as free with sort of expressing my emotion. And so my parents tried really hard to find me a drama group, and they found one that was for sort of like expat kids in Switzerland in English.
Yeah.
I think it was called Simply Theatre or something like that, and it was just this sort of like expat drama group. And I joined that, and then I was able to, you know, at least get classes and at least do it a little bit. But even then, that had just started up as sort of like this business. So they weren't really doing big productions at that point, and they are now, and they've actually become like a huge company now. But back then, that was just sort of like the first or second year that they were doing it. And so I had the classes, but I didn't really have the chance to act.
How many people were involved in those classes, and were they all your age or a range of age groups?
Yeah, so it was based on age, and it was basically like kids that had moved to Switzerland because of, you know, parents' jobs in, you know, people that were like diplomats or business people that had moved from America or the UK. And so the class was pretty small. I think it was like 10 or 11 people. But when I was going to these classes, so the first year that I was in Switzerland, I was at a Swiss school, and then I just decided like I needed to be in an English environment to thrive academically. And so my parents looked into international schools. And so the kids that I met at that drama group were at the international school about an hour away from my hometown. And so my parents put me in that school after that, which was better. But those kinds of international schools were just not great academically, because it was more sort of like a business model, and they actually put me in the wrong grade. Put me in a grade above because the lower one was full, and they didn't tell my parents. They just said that was the grade. So I went into a grade I wasn't right for, and it was the IB, which was a different system.
Oh yeah, I did the IB.
Yeah, but I ended up not, because I went back to you know, a UK school and did A-levels. But, you know, going into sort of like being in this UK primary school, first year of secondary, then going to the Swiss school, it's a completely different system. Then back to IB, it's a completely different system.
Chaotic.
Really chaotic. And then after that, I went to another school, another international school that was in my hometown, which was insane. So it was this boarding school, but I was a day student.
Yep.
In my hometown for international people, and because of that, people from, you know, all kinds of different backgrounds. But that school also didn't have anything that was fostering my, you know, drama passion. And yeah.
So with a bit of hindsight and maturity, and also academic studies now, having done, you know, a bachelor's in psychology, you're pursuing your PhD in psychology, if you think back to those 4 years in Switzerland from age 12 to age 16, what psychological concepts or theories come to mind when you try and conceptualize or try and make sense of how you felt during that time?
Yeah, so I think I did feel very socially isolated, which I think led to a lot of sort of the way that I approach friendships now, because I almost feel sort of like, I mean, it almost felt like I'd moved, lost everyone. So I almost felt like sort of like a sense of abandonment from my previous like social life. And so because of that, I think I'm very hypersocial now, because I feel like I missed out so much during those years. And so I still had friends in Switzerland, but it just wasn't the same as in the UK, because I mean, I was always extremely social as a child, and, you know, I was that kid that just wanted to meet everyone because I was so interested in, you know, what everyone was about and people's personalities and meeting people. And so that being sort of like reduced to this very small friend group because there just wasn't people that I could meet, or, you know, there was a language barrier, it was very difficult, because I think I was really lonely for a long time, I think. And then because of that, when I then did move back, I was like, oh, great, like now I need to make up for lost time and meet all of these people and, you
Sounds
know,
like
hear all of
COVID
this.
for a lot of people.
Definitely.
And then you would have had COVID.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And yeah, COVID was hard.
You had two
for
big
me as well.
moments of just socially isolation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe my sort of extroversion did actually occur due to acting, because I mean that was this fascination with what are people thinking, what are people's emotions, how can I embody them in a realistic way. And so yeah, I almost think that I was more extroverted as a child because of the acting, and then yeah, having that taken away for a while just made me just, you know, heighten the desire to actually want to have more of that.
So you made your return at age 16.
Yeah.
What were your expectations of returning? Did you just feel like life would go back to this rosiness and just amazingness and just opportunities and glory and just all the good things that you had missed out on?
So I definitely was optimistic because I did want to go back to the UK, and I had been struggling a lot in Switzerland, with the social situation. And also a lot of sort of like, especially when I was in those schools, in the Swiss schools, I did get bullied. So like that as well was... For not being Swiss, kind of. Yeah, so like because I was sort of an outsider, and it was a very small town, they kind of didn't want to include me in the initial Swiss school that I went to. And so I don't even know if it was intentional or just because it was such a small town. They sort of just didn't understand why I couldn't...
different.
Yeah, why I couldn't, speak the dialect, and why...
I wonder why.
Yeah, but, it was just sort of like this isolation.
From other kids.
Yeah.
Yep.
In that first Swiss school. And then, so in the international school, that was better. So that was the one with the kids from the drama group. And then because they put me in the wrong grade, I then moved to a different international school, which was the boarding school. And that one was an insane school. I mean, it was basically... so they proudly say that they're the most expensive school in the world. And so you can imagine the kind of kids that were there. And I got bullied for not being rich at that school. Because they would sort of like show up to school with like Louis Vuitton and Chanel at like 13 years old, and so I was there.
There's a lot of comparison.
Yeah, exactly, and I was there in my Hollister.
Family wealth.
Yeah, exactly. I was just, and I didn't understand the concept of
rich
wealth.
And poor.
Yeah, or at least to that level. And so I was felt pretty excluded there because of also being a day student. That kind of was seen as a lesser than being a boarder, because it was like you're paying less fees and you weren't really on the same level.
So
and
seeing other people bring all the brands and talking about it and discussing and clearly caring about it, was your reaction that you wanted to match it, or you also found it quite odd and quite artificial?
So I tried my best to fit in. So yeah, everything was about just fitting in that school, and I managed to do it. I mean, I was there for like...
See, that's an acting opportunity.
Exactly. And you know what? I think that actually did help, because I had to assimilate and, dress a certain way to sort of fit in and be accepted. But there was always sort of this disconnect, and people just knew that I wasn't in the same bubble.
Social, yeah.
Yeah. Or that, my parents didn't come from this, like, huge amount of wealth, or like generational wealth, or were these huge business people with like all this money. And so because of that, I did feel quite excluded, and I think that was sort of how the social hierarchy happened. It was sort of like, the more money you had, the more accepted you were.
Yeah, I understand that, but wouldn't they also think that your parents being professors is also quite a respected and high social status, or is it just money?
No, funnily enough, they would make fun of me for that, because they saw professors as teachers, and they saw that as a lesser than what their parents did. And so because of that, I would feel almost embarrassed about, my background, which is insane, but I was so young, I didn't have any sense of comparison. And they were telling me that I was sort of like poor and that... Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. It was really bad because everyone was so young and everyone grew up in this bubble that they had no concept of reality. Neither did I. And that was just how it was.
Does the school make an effort then? Because, the school should realise the demographics of it and the importance of highlighting to the cohort our enormous privileges and the need to serve and the need to give back and the need to be compassionate and empathetic and understanding.
Not at all. Wow. No.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think it's still the same as it was when I was there, which I wouldn't be surprised about. But I never felt supported by that school at all. And I think that was part of the reason my parents agreed that I should go back to the UK. They just sort of thought, that this environment is just not the right place for me to thrive. And
so clearly it sounds like there is a bit of a contrast between that environment of hierarchy, comparison, status, and ironically not even about them, it's their parents, what their parents have done.
Exactly, yeah.
Versus you, what you said earlier about, for you, it's not about fame, it's not about money, it's be able to pursue your passion in a way that sustains you and doesn't disadvantage others.
Exactly.
Having been in that environment, how did you still develop, foster, or maintain this genuine commitment to pursuing your interests rather than just going, you know what, I'm going to try make as much money as possible? And...
so I had a period of time where I thought, that's what success is. I need to be rich, I need to make money so that I can fit in with these people and actually be these people. And that was sort of what got into my head. And then I thought, no, this is not what I want to be doing. I want to, make art. I was also really into filmmaking. And so when I was at that school, I remember I started up my YouTube channel. It was like 2013. And if I'd have continued, I feel like that could have been a career in itself. But I got so bullied for doing YouTube and for doing social media at that time because it just wasn't the mainstream thing to do. And so these kids were like, why would you want to do that? It's almost like they couldn't understand some of these passions.
Why did you want to do that?
Because, so I think it was because I wanted an outlet to be able to make films, act, sort of, do that creative stuff. And that was sort of something that I thought would be fun to do. And,
so right now your oldest videos from 5 years ago, so clearly some of the videos you posted then are no longer on there.
I deleted the account because I got so bullied. I didn't want to do it, so I just deleted it. And you know what I think it was though? I think it's because if you grow up with insane wealth, you don't feel like you have to foster a desire or a passion to do anything because you already have all the fruits that come with it. So why would you need to work to get that?
It's all about pleasure and just enjoy.
Exactly. So it's almost like me having this passion to do something like that was embarrassing. Because like, why am I not already at that stage? Why do I need to do something to get there? And so because of that was just a reason that they could make fun of me.
How did you respond when they, kids come up and like, why are you doing that? What was your gut reaction? Did you smile? Did you acknowledge it? Did you fight back? Was it arguments?
I wasn't a very confrontational person, to be honest. I was just a bit sad because they would just kind of, just make these comments about how embarrassing it was and how, they'd play my YouTube videos in class and stuff. And it just hurt because, you just felt like people were observing you and not in a good way. And, they were watching you behind your back. Made you more
self-conscious.
So self-conscious, yeah. And I think it also fed into this feeling of loneliness because I couldn't pursue anything I wanted to do because I would just get backlash for it.
It was a school of boys and girls, right?
Yeah.
So was there a difference? Sorry, my throat. Was there a difference between the boys' reactions or the girls' reaction? Were they misogynistic? Was there a gender imbalance?
Not really. I think they were all equally.
Yeah,
no, not really. I think with the girls, definitely there was more of sort of a
gossipy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they sort of ganged up on me a little bit more. But the boys would be the ones that would play the videos in class. So, I don't know. I think, because the thing is, I don't hold a grudge or anything, because I think everyone was so young, nobody really knew. And I mean, group dynamics just occur, especially in these weird sort of contexts. They had their own things that were going on, and I mean, I suppose they also wanted to fit in, and because of that,
it's a culture.
Ganging together would be, how you are accepted. Because otherwise, you're the one that gets picked on. Yeah. So, because of that, I definitely don't hold a grudge, and I think it has made me the person I am today. But I do think that if I hadn't gone to Switzerland, my career would be very different now. So.
Okay, so you went back 16. I'm just thinking of the time where, by 2018, you were, doing your award-winning film American Fantasy. So how did you kind of go back, make the return, re-establish so-called your acting career at that point, and to be independent, to move away from home at that age?
So, yeah, when I was 16, I went to Durham School, which is a boarding school in Durham, which is where I was born. So I just felt like that was the right place to go. And I really liked that school. They really sort of, supported me to get the A-level results that I needed to get for uni, and also gave me some opportunities with acting as well.
Yeah. Would you, like, objectively speaking at that point, were you a good actor, whatever that means?
I don't think so. So I think that I honestly think that life experience helps you become a good actor. And I think that the life experiences that I had at that point weren't enough for me to be a good actor.
Even so I think with the move of country.
Yeah, so I think I knew that I could act, potentially. But I hadn't practiced it in so long that I'd almost lost the touch I had as a child, because that sort of, went away with the magic of it, because, I had all these experiences that were not so pleasant. And so I think I definitely still had the passion for it, but I don't think it was honed at all at that point. And so I knew that I had to do something to get back to the stage that I was, and obviously try and be able to match the skill that other people my age would have that, didn't have a break and continued acting all throughout childhood. And so, yeah, I almost felt like I definitely needed to work on my craft. And so in 2017, I started my undergrad at Manchester, and that's when I thought, okay, this is the time to start acting again. And so I joined a acting group in Manchester that was attached to an agency, and I performed at the Lowry Theatre in this show, and that's a big theatre in Manchester, and I was just so excited to be able to do it again. And after performing in that show, I got scouted by that agency and they signed me.
Felt good?
Yeah, that was incredible. I was like, that is what I needed. And it was a small agency in Manchester, but it was enough to sort of get me started.
Yep.
And so they started, submitting me for stuff. And I started.
So for those who don't really understand the process, like, what are the implications of being signed?
So basically, if you want to be a professional actor, you need an agent or an agency that submits you for different jobs and basically mediates the process of you getting auditions and manages your contracts and... kind of pushes you.
So they have your profile, they represent you.
Exactly.
They kind of work in the background because they've got the connections and they know. But in the meantime, are they paid regularly or on a commission basis? So it's all commission basis. Okay,
so you should never ever pay an agency.
Oh, okay.
So
then they have an incentive to really...
Yeah, exactly. So the commission is usually between 15 and 20% of everything you earn. And so because of that, they have, roster of clients, and they want to get those people work so that they can, get the commission.
Okay.
And so because of that, they're motivated to submit you, and they want to foster your career so that, you thrive and they thrive. That's
so them signing you, basically signalling to you that they see great potential.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, a sign of, we think you're going to be able to work in the industry.
Did you feel like that external validation was needed at that time, or did you have a lot of self-belief already?
No, so I was definitely doubting myself at that time, because I didn't know if I was still able to act. Because I knew that I could, but I wasn't sure if I was good enough to actually make it a career at that point. And so, doing the show and then watching my acting and thinking, yes, there's potential here, we want to sign you, was really validating, because I thought, okay, this could still be a thing. So it was exciting. And and then I did a few short films and, little projects here and there, and which was so much fun.
You not only act though, you also write. What was the balance between the two?
So this is interesting. I mean, I forgot to talk about this actually, but so when I moved to Switzerland, I've always been a writer alongside acting. Even as a child, I would write short stories just all the time. Because I loved writing. I just felt like that was such an outlet alongside acting, because it was another way I could be someone else and experience other emotions or situations that I would never experience in my real life. And so I wrote a lot as a child, and then when I moved to Switzerland, because I didn't have sort of like as much social contact, I turned to writing. And I wrote a full-length book when I was like 14. I think it was about zombies or something. But no, like I literally turned to writing because that was a way for me to, you know, create a world where I could have more fun than I was having in my real life. And so I was always a writer, and I loved writing short stories, and I won awards for my short stories while I was at that school in Switzerland.
Oh, fantastic.
And so yeah, like that was always something that I wanted to do, and I think my mum helped foster that as well, because she is obviously a brilliant writer, and so as
you wrote, did you then give it to her to read? Was there that openness in relationship?
Yeah, exactly. So
you trusted her so-called criticism or feedback?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even now she's still writing, of course, and I still read her stuff and she still reads mine. And yeah, she was just so encouraging, and I think I had this vivid imagination that I almost put into writing as well as acting. And so yeah, I love to write, and I had the time to do that in Switzerland. And so while I wasn't acting, I was writing. So I was honing that the whole time. And so yeah, when I was in Manchester, I didn't write for a while. I think it was about a year until I rediscovered that I wanted to write. And I thought, oh, I could actually write.
You didn't want to publish the book?
I did, but it never felt ready. So I just never did.
Can revisit now? Possibly.
So I actually wrote another book during COVID.
Wow.
Because that's the thing, as soon as I don't have social contact, I'm like, oh, let's write. Let's put me in another world. So yeah, I actually finished that book. And I'm in the process of submitting that to agents at the moment, the one that I wrote during COVID, which is a dystopian sci-fi novel about the school I was at. Yeah, interestingly enough. I mean,
you just
in
have
a
to
nutshell,
tell the truth.
Yeah, no, I mean, in a nutshell, it's basically about like authoritarianism and leadership. It's sort of like Lord of the Flies style, set in a dystopian world. So yeah.
What did you watch at that point in time, and what did you read? Because part of, I think, producing is also a byproduct of what we consume and what we choose to consume.
Definitely.
So growing up, you know, what kind of exposure did you have to the creativeness of other people?
So I read a lot, and I love dystopian fiction. So Hunger Games, Divergent, all of that stuff, you know, typical stuff. And then I also loved sort of like, you know, like Lord of the Flies and all these like classics. All the dystopian, weird, psychological books were sort of my favourite. And so I would read a lot, and then I think I always had a passion to write dystopian fiction. That was just sort of what I wanted to do. And I think that definitely helped me develop my skills. And I also loved sort of TV shows that would handle those same sorts of topics. Lots of like apocalyptic stuff. Because I thought it was so interesting to see what humans are like when really stripped back to, you know, their initial sort of
instincts.
Instincts and
the most
psychological
extreme,
motivation, and like what do they do and what are the driving forces behind their behaviour.
And what have you come to so far in terms of that realisation? What are human nature? What are the instincts we have?
Yeah, it's such a big question. But I think a lot of my own experiences and sort of reading this sort of fiction and doing psychology inspired the book that I wrote during COVID, because basically in a nutshell what it is about is it's this elaborate psychological experiment where the brightest, sort of like 200 of the brightest kids do all of these aptitude tests and get selected for this experiment. This experiment takes place in this school, and it's sort of like a school in the Swiss Alps, just like my school, and they basically are told that they are royals. And their memories are wiped, so they're put in this environment and they're told that they have authority and that they're special and that they're like royals, right? And within the school is a hierarchy, so there's like first descendant, second, and like third and whatever. And so they're put in this environment, and then they're left to their own devices, and there's like a lack of authoritarianism and sort of like, I suppose like they get abandoned at that school. There's sort of like an event that they think was sort of like a takeover, and they're abandoned at the school. And so it's Lord of the Flies, like desert island style. What happens with these sort of like authoritarian roles and what happens if you tell someone that they're special and better than someone else and put them in an environment where they have to form hierarchies. How do they form?
Wow.
And what happens? And so that's what the story is about. And within the experiment, the kids are not able to die. And so within the thing, one of them sort of like is on the brink of death, should have died, doesn't. And they come to the conclusion that they're so powerful that they're immortal. And so that just fuels their sort of like superiority complex. Because they're like, wow, we're royals and we're immortal. And we're better than everyone. And we're better than the other kids who are also royals, but not as good as we are. So it's like, how does that happen? And that was inspired by my experiences at that school. And so I wrote that, and then, yeah, basically at the end, I'm not going to spoil it because I might still publish it. Well, I'm in the process of trying to get that published. But yeah, it's basically just looking at sort of authoritarianism and what happens.
So before you get the whole book together and get the whole plot out, do you try and map out the conclusion, or do you just go bit by bit and see where it takes you? Like, what's the process of the drafting, the conceptualizing process?
The exciting part for me is letting the story take itself somewhere, because it's almost like reading. Because if you're writing, you're like letting the story take itself. And so sometimes it doesn't go in a direction that makes sense, and then, you revisit. But I think that's exciting to me, to see what happens. And so I didn't know what the ending was going to be. I just had this concept. I knew I wanted to talk about the school that I'd been in. I knew that I wanted to talk about psychological concepts. I knew I wanted it to be an experiment. I knew I wanted it to be something that was similar to psychological thrillers that are very thought-provoking, like Lord of the Flies. And I also wanted it to, take elements of famous psychological experiments that are very highly publicized and very unethical, but fascinating, like the Stanford prison experiment, I don't know if you're familiar.
Of course, yeah.
And so, yeah, I think just having this idea of approximately what I wanted to include, but not knowing how the story would unfold and how the friendship group would look and how the romances happen was exciting, because I could sort of make my characters experience all these different things and these dynamics. And yeah, I mean, I was almost living through the book during COVID. I mean, there was no social contact, so I was living through my characters and they were having a great time. So yeah, so I think that was.
So part of it is obviously, it's personally enriching, it's creative, it's thoughtful. You get to almost, it serves a cathartic purpose of processing your emotions and your experiences. But in your mind, part of you, I guess, also knew that other people will potentially read your story. Do you want them to form their own conclusion, or are there any general themes or messages or morals that you feel like you want your work or your brand to embody or to promote?
Yeah, I think I definitely want people to come up with their own conceptualizations of what they think the messages are. And so I never want to sort of like drive. So I always feel like it's hard to sort of strike a balance between achieving the sort of messages or displaying the messages I want to display while not being too in your face and being like, oh, this is the cliche message of, everyone is a terrible person deep down, which is definitely not the case. But, sort of like, I think it's just more about, I want people to sort of see what it's like for the psychology of being human to drive your behaviours and what that looks like in sort of like a fictional context, if that makes sense. So I think it's just more up to the beholder to decide.
And as the story unfolded, obviously it's so much about human nature, how we react in extreme situations.
Yeah.
Did your views about humans and society evolve much?
During writing? Or, yeah, I think...
Like, what's something that you deeply believed in? And then as you were writing, you go, hey, actually, maybe I wasn't completely right there.
I think it's more that I had that experience of that school in Switzerland where people were in this bubble where they truly believed that they were better than everyone else. At least some of the people. And so because of that, I wanted to almost illustrate that people are complicated and people are not fundamentally all bad or all good or, you know, have this trajectory.
Brush,
yeah, exactly. It's more that your own environment changes the way that you might behave. So, you know, the concept of the book, these like super bright kids who, you know, are really academically intelligent and definitely work their way up to get selected for the experiment, get put in a position where they're in a bubble where they truly believe all of these hierarchies. And, you know, that changes their behaviour, changes their fundamental sort of beliefs and concepts.
Is any part of you look back to those bullies now and actually feel sorry or bad for them that they have been trapped in this bubble, that they missed out on the full appreciation of other people, of society, of ambitions, of dreams, of goals? And
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not that everyone was not ambitious, obviously.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I feel like everyone, like, you can't experience all of what life has to offer in one human body.
So we're always in a bubble.
Yeah, so we're always in some sort of bubble.
Yeah.
And I just think it was more of an extreme one that I got to witness because I wasn't in it. And so because of that, I have like a way bigger conceptualization of like what that looks like and what my bubble looks like. Whereas, you know, they're just in theirs and some people might just be in theirs. That doesn't mean that they're bad people or that they don't understand the world. It's just the environment that they're in.
And what's the way for us to get out of your bubble? Obviously the cliche or the obvious common sense ones are to move cities, but it's not always possible,
yeah.
right?
I think it's more sort of meeting people from all sorts of different backgrounds and being open to friendships with people that you wouldn't necessarily see yourself being in the same social sphere as, and just being, you know, receptive to people's experiences and listening to people's stories and that kind of thing.
Do you make an effort to do that?
Definitely. So basically after my undergrad in Manchester, so did my undergrad in psychology, really enjoyed it, was acting alongside that. Then COVID hit, moved back to Switzerland to live with my parents to, you know, ride out the COVID wave. That's when I wrote. And then after sort of like, as COVID was happening, I was supposed to go to UCL in London for a master's in psychology. And I deferred it because of COVID. And so instead I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and I also worked as an assistant researcher and started up sort of like a business master's on the side that I didn't end up enjoying, so I just didn't do it. But working in a psychiatric hospital was such an eye-opening experience because I was able to put the skills that I'd learned in my undergrad into practice while meeting people from all different backgrounds and realizing that humans are so similar and that your circumstance could, because I was working in the substance abuse and rehabilitation unit, and it's just sort of like realizing that, you know, mental health difficulties and, you know, addiction can happen to literally anyone. Yeah, it doesn't matter, you know, who you are or what your background is. Everyone, you know, is susceptible to these things, and it's just fascinating to, you know, hear people's stories and understand why things happened, or, you know, why they fell into addiction, you know, how they got out of it. And so that was so eye-opening, and I think that really sort of confirmed that I wanted to do psychology if I was going to stay in academia, also go down a clinical route alongside acting. And also meeting people and speaking about those kinds of things helped me to almost understand myself better as an actor too, because then I was able to sort of, not in like a crude way, but sort of like draw on, you know, why a character might be feeling this sort of way and what could their backstory have been, and, you know, where did these emotions come from and how can I do that in a convincing way. So I think that definitely helped me become a better actor as well. But I think like acting is something that sort of stems from, you know, you being a perceptive and empathetic person, which I think I am. And I mean, it's actually interesting. So there's a doctorate at the University of Oxford, like the clinical psychology doctorate, and in the application, if you have theatre or drama skills, it adds to your application. So it says like, please tell us if you have drama or theatre skills.
Wow.
So it's almost like that actually helps you become a better clinician because you're able to put yourself in other people's shoes, which I think is super important. And so, yeah, I mean, that was also, I mean, all of my writing, my acting, everything always goes back to psychology. So it does complement it. And yeah, I think I almost fell into that path because of the two.
So being an actor, you get this requirement or training in order to act out different characters, emotions, to understand, to interpret, to adapt. For those who don't do as much acting or drama as you do, are there any, like, if you were advising them, what core strategies or concrete actions can we all take in our daily lives to foster those attributes, traits, awareness, mindsets?
Yeah, so the thing with acting, unlike being a dentist, where you go to school, you learn that, you do it, and you do a good job because, you know, if you do all of these steps, you can get to that. With acting, you can go to drama school, but still not work in the industry or have even developed as an actor.
But the transferable skills you gain, speaking, the confidence.
Yeah, definitely. But I think with acting, it's more that life, like the experience of being human is the most important part to informing how you act. And so because of that, you don't actually need the training of drama school to do that. And so like, obviously classes help, you know, learning how to sort of you know, portray different emotions and learning how to break down scripts obviously is so important. But unlike other professions, I think it's something that comes with just being human.
But surely there are concrete like exercise, like even voice training or how to project your voice, standing up tall, hand gestures, you know, what are some basic, simple things that we can all implement almost immediately?
I think it's more just observing how other people react and other people's mannerisms.
So you're sitting
and
in
how
front
they
of me.
portray.
What are you looking at? Are you looking at my face? Are you looking at the overall body?
Yeah, I mean, it's never a conscious thing. So it's not like I'm like, oh, you're, you know, folding your hands like this, so I need to do that if I want to portray your emotions. It's more just like understanding people's natural demeanors and how they sort of interact with people. And I almost feel like the more people you meet, the better of an actor you are, because you've met, you know, people from all different walks of life and how.
So we met in person for the first time today. What did you expect coming in? What did you see? You know, we had coffee, we walked, we chatted, we started the recording. What are some observations? And you can be completely honest. I just find it interesting to see what you see.
It's a very deep question. No, I mean, I definitely could tell straight away that you were a confident person and that you have experience sort of, you know, conducting podcasts and interviews and speaking and making people feel at ease and being able to, you know, talk naturally. And I think that's definitely like a great skill. You have like great people skills, which is actually what you need for this kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just things like that, you know, like when I meet someone, I can tell, you know, how confident they are. And I mean, everyone can. And I think, yeah, that's what makes it really interesting to meet different people, because you can almost tell what they do or what their passions are by the way that they act. Like I can almost always tell if someone's like in a creative industry just because of, you know, how they also speak about their passions. So like when you were describing the podcast, it's just, you know, the enthusiasm you had behind that is like the same way that I would speak about my writing or my acting, or, you know, someone else speaks about their filmmaking. So it's sort of that sort of like spark behind it that you can definitely see in people's eyes, I think.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about like Daniel Kahneman's, you know, thinking fast and slow, you know, that type 1 thinking, their intuitive judgments that you say, oh, we can just see it. But as you know, people are complex and circumstances do change. And I'm sure as you write your book, you gradually see the nuances, which is, you know, type 2 thinking and really getting past our intuitions and the biases that we have. Yeah. How do you then have that first impression and then not fall into the biases that we all tend to fall into, like confirmation biases of certain people, certain roles, certain circumstances, and actually reach more towards the holistic picture? What do you do?
Mm-hmm. So I think everyone falls victim to those kinds of biases.
And we need to.
Yeah,
because we can't live with...
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, again, it's not sort of like a conscious thing. I think it's more sort of understanding where people come from and why they act the way they are that sort of like feeds into me trying to get a bigger picture of like someone and, you know, what their motivations are. And yeah, I mean, I think it is definitely important to observe and listen. But then I also think with writing, I always feel like I'm the most truthful when I come from a position that I've actually experienced, when I like write about something that I have experienced, which is I think also what inspired the play that I wrote. So talking about, you know, something that I personally have experienced, so I can actually take that character and make them real. And so with acting, I can embody other people, but I feel like with writing, it's so much more personal. And I feel like a lot of my writing...
What's the most personal criticism that you have got, and how did that make you feel?
Personal criticism? So what do you mean by that, in terms of...
Like, I'm sure living a public life and as an actor, people comment perhaps about you and it feels unnecessarily personal or harsh, and what are the difficult things that you have heard? So,
I feel like I've not really had that many mean things said about me, which is nice. Maybe nice. Not to my face.
Because I know you got the TikTok, you've got your YouTube, and I'm sure that there are just trolls around this.
Yeah, so I don't know, because like a lot of the time it's just really stupid things that they comment that doesn't actually make any sense.
Yeah, when it's so stupid, it loses credibility.
Yeah, exactly. So it's never actually been anything directed at me.
But has there been someone who you've really respected, but then they gave you a piece of criticism and you just go, oh, wow, that hurts because you respect them or you care about them so much? It's like they say, you know, betrayals hurt the most because they're people you trust and they're your friends.
Yeah. I think I'm lucky to have been surrounded by people that support me rather than try to pull me down. And obviously there's been criticism...
But constructive
criticism.
Okay.
You know, like, oh, you could do this better, or, you know, this would be better this way. You know, when I give my friends, like, my stuff to write, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is normal. But luckily, I don't think I've been around people that are so negative that they just sort of, like, tear it down. Yeah. And I think that also stems from being in those environments as when I was younger, where, you know, I was just criticised for everything. Yeah. And so I think I've, like, developed very thick skin. So, like, nothing people can say really changes what I do. So I'll always continue to write and act, like, no matter what.
Wonderful. That's really good to hear. I was just looking at your YouTube videos, your TikTok videos, and one of the common themes seems to be bad dates and just horrible men. Is that just part of the fundamental human experiences that a lot of people seem to have?
So, yes. And also, that is what gathers interest. Because that is a very universal thing. And especially with my TikTok, that's where I was able to find a niche. People wanted advice on that kind of thing. And so I provided that. Especially using sort of like my psychology knowledge. I'm able to sort of, you know, break things down in very simple, you know, easy to eat terms, for people to, like, understand, you know, certain behaviours, like, you know, toxic behaviours in partners and that kind of thing. I think that was more...
Are most men bad and toxic?
No, I don't think so. I think it's something that's a very common experience, and because of that, there's a demand for that kind of media, because people want, you know, answers, or, you know, I can't provide answers, but people want, you know, like, a little bit of conceptualization to, you know, why people are the way they are, especially in terms of relationships. And so that just was what was gathering interest.
Do you believe in relationships, or?
Yeah, I didn't for a while. So, yeah, so, I mean, actually, well, yeah, going back to the play that is going to the Off West End next week. So that was written when I was in a very low point, relationship wise, because of obviously the topics it surrounds. And I did feel that I wasn't going to find sort of like true love or somebody that actually cared about me fundamentally, because I've always been in toxic relationships until actually after I wrote the play I met someone really nice, and so he's very sweet, and it's the first time I've been in a healthy relationship, and so that's also changed my perception of what relationships mean. And I think it also came at the right time because I'd had all of these horrible experiences, and then writing the play was like a catharsis for that, which we can get more into. But because of, I always was able to let go of all of that and put it behind me through writing again, which is, you know, how I tend to do things. And I think I was free to open myself up to meet someone that was going to be good for me. And that just ended up happening pretty spontaneously. And yeah, like I'm very happy now in the relationship that I'm in. But it definitely took time to get to that stage. And I think before that I had a very negative view of what relationships meant, at least for me. And
are those bad experiences almost necessary, or can we avoid it?
I feel like you can never avoid it. I mean, also just the things that people experience in toxic relationships is so common. And
what are the common?
So, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, the first relationship I was in, just sort of like behaviors that were, you know, like emotionally manipulative and things like that. And it's not even that the person knows that they're doing it.
It's very conscious, calculated.
It could be, but also could not be. You know what I mean? Like, also sometimes the compatibility of two people just causes emotional friction. And so I had a lot of toxic relationships that were very emotionally manipulative. And then obviously I had a very negative experience last year, which is what inspired the play. And so I think it was important to, almost deal with that through the medium of writing, I think. Yeah.
It does seem to be the case, and perhaps very unfortunate, that lots of the very best creative work happens at our lowest points when we are feeling extremely hopeless, depressed, despaired. Might sound like a weird question, but do you, part of you, the creative side of you, do you also relish and cherish the inevitable low points of life, realizing that this could be, wow, you're entering a different zone? It sounds really bad, but did any part of you realize just how important those moments are?
I definitely don't, obviously
don't
enjoy the lows. Yeah, I'll seek them out. But when they do happen, I think I just have sort of like a mindset that I take the lows as
opportunity.
Not even opportunity, more that I like want to change the negative experiences I have into something positive. So it's like, if I'm gonna have this experience, and I have to have this experience, not like I'm in control of it, I want to turn it into something that can help other people, and turn it into something that I can get my own catharsis with and move on from. And because of that, I think it comes, this is the thing with like the low points and obviously like real life experiences, it makes what I create so much more meaningful, also to myself and to other people, because I think then people can appreciate that this is something that's really important that needs to get out, and because I've experienced it myself, it gives me credibility to talk about it. Because, you can write about anything. I mean, creative freedom is endless. But is it problematic to talk about things that you haven't experienced in a first-person perspective that are so sensitive? Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is, but it does mean that I feel like, at least with the stuff I write, I'm confident to say I've experienced this, so I think I'm in a position where I can talk about it.
And as you mentioned, not what you experience is almost certainly not unique to you, and other people do seems to relate to that. And when other people share their similar stories to you and you resonate with them, are there any like good conversations or anecdotes you have where you just bonded over that shared struggle? And how did that make you feel? Like, did that inspire you to post more videos? And
so you mean in terms of like meeting people who had gone through similar things?
Yeah, especially having a public profile where this is the first point of contact, which is that, hey, wow, I relate to that, and I just also came out of something bad.
Definitely. So a lot of my psychology videos, well, I mean, actually everything to do with psychology also stemmed from, so I have anxiety, and I developed it in first year of undergrad. And so a lot of my videos about dealing with anxiety, and I mean mental health, and because I come from a place where I have experienced that, I'm able to talk about it in the same way I do with like when I create art. And so I've had a lot of people reach out to me after making videos like that, telling me that it's really helped them to hear somebody going through the same thing and having the exact same symptoms and exact same thought processes that they have. And so that has been incredible, because I mean, it makes me feel like what I'm doing actually is meaningful. And so I think in terms of like people through the internet, they definitely have reached out in terms of stuff to do with mental health. And then in my real life, there's been a lot of people who have been through similar things in terms of sexual assault, which is what inspired the play, that, you know, have shared their stories with me, and I felt less alone in that. And I mean, those very people were the ones who encouraged me to write about it and make it into something that is going to make an impact.
Are there general psychological explanations or theories that hypothesize why so many people get in that toxic situation? Like, I'm just thinking like with, say, online dating, for example, you're just swiping people, so you're really only judging someone by their appearance or what they decide to put, and therefore there's a bias there. Like that as one example. Like in modern society, with the modern lives that we're living, the challenges with technology, with social media, with the pursuit of meaning, cost of living crisis, etc., what do you think, what do you hypothesize are the reasons why so many toxic relationships happen when initially everything just seems very rosy and romantic and good?
I think it's because people fundamentally are romantics, and I think they want things to be, I think they don't want to, I mean, nobody seeks out a toxic relationship, right? Nobody's like, oh, I want a toxic relationship. Well, maybe someone does, but that would be odd. So I think it's just that people fall for toxic patterns such as love bombing and sort of like, you know, an over clinginess initially, because it, you know, feels good. It feels like you're held and loved and wanted. And so, especially with people with like low self-esteem or anxiety or, you know, insecure attachment types, that feels good. That feels validating. It makes you feel secure and whole. And so, yeah, I think that it's just something that happens as a byproduct of being vulnerable. And I think people who have those insecure attachment types are more susceptible to toxic relationships. And so I have an insecure attachment type, which I think stems from my experiences being bullied, being, you know, socially excluded, that kind of thing. And so because of that, I'm definitely was more susceptible to toxic relationships, because I felt like I needed someone to sort of like
hold you.
make me feel like whole almost, and, you know, convince me that they wouldn't abandon me. And so I'd be really, really susceptible to love bombing, because I'd be like, oh yeah, of course they like me. Like, nice. Like, yeah, it's like, cool. Like, yeah, this makes me feel like they're not going to leave, because they obviously like me so much, they're doing all of this. But then that's usually, you know, love bombing behaviour, which basically just means that they're trying to get you emotionally invested, and then, you know, maybe they don't feel the same way. And, you know, it's not always intentional. Like, there's people that just think that that's how they should initiate a relationship, but then they don't actually feel what they're doing. So like they're not even, I mean, they don't actually want to love bomb, or they don't want a connection with someone. They just want that person around, and they know that's going to keep them around. And then when they've had enough, they stop, and then it's sort of, you know, the push and pull of a toxic relationship. So like definitely that kind of thing. And I mean, I was very susceptible to that, and yeah, and I think that led me into situations that weren't great.
So people nowadays conceptualize dating, or the purpose of dating, very differently. You know, a more conservative, traditional view might be dating is to see whether you're the right fit for marriage, for a long-term, lifelong relationship. Other people might see dating as just, let's have a bit of fun and let's see what happens. How have your views of the purpose of dating evolved? Are you dating to find someone long-term? Are you dating to just see how things go? Like, how do you interpret, with all your play experience, creative experience, psychological experience, knowing the pitfalls that we could all fall into and the risks that can come from a toxic relationship? How do you see dating?
So I've always been a romantic. So like for me, dating means, yeah, like we're gonna stay together, hopefully. Like I always thought that casual dating was a bit of a waste of time for me, because I mean, if I'm gonna spend that much time with someone, I expect them to stick around in my life, at least for a while. And so I always saw it as sort of, you know, checking the compatibility for a longer term thing. And that's just how I've always seen it. And so because of that, it made it very difficult when the people I was dating didn't feel the same way. And, you know, or told me they did,
that's
but
the
didn't mean it.
Part,
yeah, exactly. And so like I would fall for it every time. And so yeah, I think luckily, I mean, it's actually funny how my desire to meet someone in that way and to, you know, date for a long-term partnership hasn't changed, despite all of the toxic relationships. It's like every time one happens, I'm like, okay, next one. Because I say this to my friends as well, I always say that every breakup, you're one step closer to your soulmate, which just means that, you know, you'll get there. Yeah. And so, for some reason, I've just not changed that view of dating, which I think is nice, because at least I haven't sort of got this, like, dark view of the world because of the things that have happened to me in the past. So, and I mean, because of that, I've ended up meeting someone really nice and sweet and kind. And it's great, because I've let myself stay open to that. And stay trusting, which is interesting, because, you know, you would have thought that I wouldn't trust anymore after some of the stuff that's happened, but yeah. And so I think...
how do you vet and understand people's trustworthiness and character? Like, is it just through their daily actions? Is it a function of time? Is it their background? Like, obviously it's a holistic assessment, but to you, what are the indicators that you look for?
Yeah, I mean, I always see it as sort of like trust until proven untrustworthy.
Okay.
So I always feel like I do give my trust very easily, which is maybe a good and a bad thing. But because of that, I just kind of like think, okay, this person should be trustworthy until they prove that they're not. So yeah, so I just kind of, you know, go with it, live my life, let them live theirs. So I can't really tell a lot of the time with like the signs of an untrustworthy person. Yeah. And I think that's to do with my attachment type. But it just means that I trust easily and, you know, allow them over time to prove that I was right or prove that I was wrong. So yeah, so I think it's just one of those things. And yeah, I mean, despite what did happen in my previous relationships, I for some reason have still got that trust. But it did take some time to sort of open myself back up again, especially after the events that inspired Gaslight.
Well, thank you for your honesty, and just, I don't know, it's never ever easy to be vulnerable and to reveal that we have had low points and we have made big emotional investments that perhaps didn't pay off, and that perhaps we all make mistakes as well, but I think what has struck me so far is just your sense of openness, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why you have been such, just from the online presence, such an inspiration to a lot of people.
Oh, thank you.
Because they see that authenticity and genuineness, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
In terms of your career then, being an actor, being a writer, it's the creative dream that many people have, but as we all know, we live in a world that has a constant economical, financial demand, that opportunities are not always evenly spread, that there are uncertainty, there are no guarantees. How do you handle uncertainty? What does the future look like for you in the short and medium term?
Yeah, so in terms of financial security, the creative industry is never one that is particularly fruitful, especially in the beginning of any sort of creative passion.
So that hurdle, if you can make it, then you've
Yeah,
made it.
exactly. And so for me, doing my PhD, doing a second career on the side is what has enabled me to be able to do that. So it's sort of, put me in a position where I'm around other people that are creative, given me the financial resources to be creative, and also allowed me to be able to do that time-wise, because I think time is money a lot of the time as well, and still studying means that I have more time to pursue creative passions. And so with Gaslight, the play, which obviously handles topics of sexual assault in a sensitive manner, because it's about sort of like a metaphorical stab wound. It's actually like, it's a dystopian play set in a world where being stabbed is treated the same as sexual assaults. So it's basically treated in a world where you're stabbed, they acknowledge it, but nobody really does anything. And so the viewer vicariously feels the frustrations of the main character, because you see this person literally bleeding out on stage and you're like, why is nobody doing anything? And so that's supposed to vicariously make people think about themselves and how they perceive sexual assault and that kind of thing. And this play was obviously a very vulnerable thing to do, and financially it was difficult to think of how can I get this story out. And I knew I had to get the story out because I just needed more awareness about it, and I wanted to do it in a sensitive way that wasn't going to be triggering. And once I wrote it, I was like, okay, this needs to come to life. And then being at Cambridge, especially being at Trinity, I was able to win funding to put it on the Off West End during Camden Fringe, which is, what's happening. And so that is so incredible that I was able to have the opportunity to really bring my art to the world and have the financial resources to do that. And also have the resources in terms of all the people in Cambridge Theatre, incredible people in Cambridge Theatre, like production team, the cast, everyone that came together to make this happen is, mostly Cambridge students. And Cambridge has fostered that. So if I wasn't at Cambridge, I don't know if I would have been able to tell my story the way I have. And so, yeah, I think I'm just in a very lucky position to be able to pursue both acting and writing while being at Cambridge and while getting the story out.
Sounds like a great community that you have and a great team.
Yeah, exactly. So, the one thing about Cambridge Theatre is that it's so professionally done, despite it being student theatre. Everyone is so passionate about what they do, which I think is part of the reason why they're at Cambridge, because, they're doing degrees and they work to a very high level and they have drive, incredible drive, and they fuel that into their passions as well. And because of that, the quality of theatre is just incredible, because everyone just puts their everything into it. And it's really humbling and incredible that this team of people, and we have a team of maybe over 10 people on this play, and they are dedicating this time to make this a reality, and they really believe in the story and the importance of bringing it to stage. And it's just an incredible feeling when people believe in what you want to say, to the point where they are literally dedicating weeks of their life to make it happen. And so that's so exciting. And I mean, the concept for the play is something that I don't think I've seen performed in theatre before. And it might seem like a basic analogy, but I think it's something that hopefully will strike a chord and resonate with people, and
very important.
Yeah, exactly, and make people understand, you know, just how important it is to raise awareness about these issues. So yeah.
Wonderful. And for you personally, with the career goal of being able to live on acting, what needs to go right for that to happen?
So I think it's a lot of luck, definitely a lot of luck, but I also think that the success of a creative job is the byproduct of making something truthful that people want to listen to. And so I think, I mean, my advice for anyone in the creative industry is to just keep doing what you're passionate about, because if you're passionate enough about it, people will want to hear what you have to say, or will want to, you know, listen to the stories you want to tell, because that's just, I mean, that's your passion, and people can see that, and people, you know, want to see what you have to bring to the table. And so I think it's just, you know, pursuing what you want to do that allows you to make it a reality and make it happen, and the success that comes with that is just a byproduct. I think it's more about like the real motivations behind doing a creative passion. And so yeah, I mean, that's definitely what underpinned Gaslight as well. I mean, this was never supposed to be something that I gain success and financial gain from, because with theatre, that's not something that usually happens anyway. It was more I wanted to tell the story, and so did everyone who's on the team, and because of that, we've made it a reality. And I think more than anything, it's just we want to, you know, express ourselves, bring the story to life, have people see it. So
I'm so excited and wish you and the team the best of luck. I know I can only imagine how much effort and time and emotional investment would go into something like this, so personal, so authentic, and very much looking forward to how it goes. I'm mindful you've got a train to catch, and I don't want you to miss that. But in the context of giving you a legacy-worthy interview, you know, a piece of recording that captures a snapshot of where you are, and that you can look back in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time and have great meaning. We've touched on quite a lot of different things, but I've also got a round of rapid-fire questions and maybe 2 to conclude. But before that, is there anything else that you feel like is deeply important that you want to capture in this recording?
I think we have covered most of the things. But yeah, if anyone's interested in coming to see Gaslight, it's the 17th to 20th of August next week at Etc. Theatre in Camden. So yeah, if you'd like to come, we'd love to have you there. And we're very excited to bring that to stage. And I mean, it is the first play that I've written that's coming to life, and, you know, coming to off West End, which is extremely exciting. So yeah, just come along if you'd like to see that. And that's great. I think that's...
Well, round of rapid fire question. Just before I go with that question, you were nominated for the podcast, so maybe it is important for me to just read out why you've been nominated by someone.
Yeah.
So they wrote on my nominations form, "Hello, my friend Shaira Yasmin Berg has put together a play for the Camden Fringe that she wrote and is acting in, ! She is an incredible actress. Her Insta shows lots of premieres she's been to and films she's been in on her IMDb. And is also a researcher in neuroscience. Basically, she's a very cool person, and she'd absolutely love to be on the podcast if you would have her. I don't know if you're around with it being summer, but she's based London, Cambridge. Also, big fan of your podcast. Such a great job." Rapid fire question. What's your favourite colour?
Pink.
Who do you text the most at the moment?
My boyfriend.
Favourite breakfast?
Chicken and waffles.
Name an onomatopoeia.
Oh God, I forgot what that was. What's an onomatopoeia?
You know, like bang. The word is the sound.
Oh, I don't know. It's a tough one.
What are some of the nicknames that you've got?
I don't really have that many nicknames. Although in high school people used to call me Sky.
Happy with that nickname?
Yeah.
What dish do you cook best?
Teriyaki chicken.
You receive a phone call from a number that you don't know. How do you pick up the phone?
Hello?
The most influential book that you've ever read?
Oh, that's so hard. Lord of the Flies.
Which animal are you most similar to?
A black panther.
The most time, like the board game that you lose sense of time
in. Monopoly.
Best first date idea. Not the restaurant with bad food.
No. I didn't see that too. Best first dates. I guess drinks and good vibes.
Finish the sentence. The way to my heart is...
Food.
What kind of food?
Sushi.
Sushi. Nice. Do you consider yourself to be tech savvy? Sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Yes.
Do you believe in soulmates?
Yes.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Second to last question then. This can be more of a longer question. You said you believe in ghosts, you believe in soulmates, you don't believe in God.
No.
You've gone through a lot. You've looked through psychology. You have immersed yourself in dystopia, in creativity. The experiments that you've seen of people in extreme situations and how we behave. You've made statements about how we're all quite similar, but also how we're quite complex. So, based on all that you've seen at this point, I understand that our thoughts are constantly evolving and we're developing. What, in your opinion, best captures this notion or idea or ideal of capital T truth that you kept on alluding to about, it's got to be truthful. So I guess you seem to believe that there's an objective capital T truth. So what, in your opinion, perhaps a religion, perhaps not for you, perhaps it's a school of thought, perhaps it's a psychological theory, perhaps it's an attitude. What do you think best captures or represents capital T truth?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think it's probably... I think everybody sort of has... I think the universe is made up of patterns, right? I think everyone has different potentialities that they can go down. So I think everyone has different paths that, their physical body, passions and desires and talents allow them to go down. So like branches almost. And so I think everyone can, do these different paths that could lead them, to different careers, different outcomes. And I think that because of that, everyone has, something that they are passionate about. And I think finding that branch is what is truth. So I think everyone has, a branch that is the one they really want to go down.
Just going to add one more question, actually. We hear this idea of finding your passion all the time, and it sounds great, and it probably is great, but part of, as we talked about, the reality of life is you always have to take things in balance, and if you are saying struggling to make ends meet, it probably isn't a good idea to just quit everything just to pursue your passion.
Yeah.
So you can either answer the question, what's the worst advice you've received, or how do you ensure to stay realistic while pursuing the passion?
Yeah, so I think passions are never like a be-all or end-all, and I don't think it's something that has to be all immersive. And because of that, I think with literally everything, you can do it in moderation, and you can do it in a way where, you dedicate, even if you didn't have the time, like an hour a week to doing that passion. And I think there's ways to do it, to do anything. And I think there's always ways to sort of like foster a passion, even if you are really busy, with your real life job that isn't your passion. And yeah, I think some people are obviously a lot more fortunate in terms of like time that they have to dedicate. And so yeah, there is obviously cases of people that wouldn't be able to pursue it in the same way that, for example, I would. But I do think that there is a way to foster it in everyone at some point.
I like that. And also I think one of the more reassuring things I've heard throughout my upbringing is that this idea of passion, lots of people, or like authenticity, it seems to imply that there's just something in us that is stable, static, that we just need to pull out and have the courage to pull out. But actually, we're evolving, we're adapting.
Yeah, exactly.
And you actually develop passion. Yeah. Like, not everything starts being rosy.
And there's definitely not one passion. I think I have many. I think everyone has many. And that's what I mean with, like, the branches. There's just so many things, you know, you could do. And so it's definitely something that's dynamic and always changing.
Definitely.
And yeah, I've got no idea what my passions will be in the future. I wonder if they'll be the same or not. Or something different, or I'll discover something new about myself. But yeah, I think it's something that is always... I mean, it's exciting because there's always something you can seek out within yourself.
My usual final question is like, what's one message quote or saying you wish every educator, teacher would promote and every kid would internalise? But I feel like you've shared a lot about your advice. I'm going to change the last question, and that's with the context of all the things that you've been through, you know, from 4 or 5, realising that you had an interest in acting and having the opportunity, asking your parents to sign up to the agency, and to feel like that is what you are destined to do and that you can make it and that's your thing. Going through school, having all those different plays and really enjoying your social circles in the UK, having a wonderful time, you know, trying out different things, but then having that big turning point where your parents got the job in Switzerland, but obviously they being professors, dad from Oxford, mum from Cambridge.
Other way around.
Okay, so dad from Cambridge, mum from Oxford. Exactly. Mum does Chinese culture
and literature,
and
my dad does
psychology. In Switzerland, instantly realising that you perhaps don't fit in and don't belong with a different language, falling a bit behind academically compared to where you used to be, in a different social circle, but most importantly, not having the opportunity to continue your passion in acting, trying to find play opportunities, but the only ones available being church plays. But then realising you were probably a bit over-dramatic for what the conservative impression want to hold. Also realising this sense of hierarchy with social inequality and wealth and the sense of comparison that sounded quite toxic. Realising that what you want out of life perhaps is quite different to how other people see what is necessary, such as, you know, starting your YouTube channel and being laughed at and just feeling like you were being scrutinised and being self-conscious, not having the kind of just friendship to really rest on and to grow in a healthy manner, chatting to your parents about that environment and realising that you perhaps just need to get out, but in that time as well being able to do more writing because you had that free time and you felt like that was a cathartic release, and to write your basically first book, and even though it's not published at the moment, it was still such a valuable chance to, you know, converse with mum, to learn from her, to share your emotions, to share your stories, and then at age 16 deciding that you are old enough and ready and independent enough to go back and to re-establish yourself, to constantly think about what those 4 years away would mean for your career. Perhaps it stunted your growth, perhaps it helped you to add a different perspective and the real life experience that allows you to, you know, better capture truth in your own writing, in your own performance, and coming back and gradually getting back on track with your career and having that signature moment of being signed by the agency and feeling like perhaps it is possible again. To do your, you know, award-winning film with the American Fantasy, to get the prizes, the nominations, to meet those people, to go to Manchester, but then to develop, you know, anxiety as well from COVID as well, the isolation. But also, you know, there seems to be a silver lining with all of that, is that you seem to then devote more time to writing and have more chance to make sense of the reality of the highs and lows that you experience. Realising that a lot of people have similar stories, you know, we all have, you know, toxic moments, we all make mistakes, but also that we are all complex and we all depend on the circumstances that we're in. to have those bad relationships and to be trusting and to be betrayed, to lose to lose trust in humanity and to doubt and worry with the uncertainty, but also stumbling into a healthy relationship and to be a romantic again, and to trust and to look forward to, and to have optimism, to choose to do your PhD at Cambridge, to realise that you need a fallback option that also can complement your acting and your play, to finding that community, to really feeling like that sense of belonging, but also that aspiration that you can still make it, and while recognising that luck plays a role, there are also agency, and there's also factors and things that you can do to devote time to your passion. When you think about all that you've been through, the linear and the non-linear path, the silver linings that you wouldn't have realised at the time, what you've learned from interactions with different people, hearing other people's story, for someone meeting you new, they are impressed by you, what advice do you have for, like, how do people get to know you better, and how do people build a rapport with you, and how can people support you, and how can people make you feel loved and make you feel appreciated, and how would you recommend other people who are perhaps daunted by your many achievements and articulation, you know, your sense of confidence, your passion, your creativity? You're obviously quite an impressive individual. How do people get to know you?
Well, thank you. I think one of the things that I like to say is that people can get to know me through the art that I make. So I think people that listen to my stories, that listen to the things that I produce, you know, the things I write, read those things, you know, see my plays, that kind of thing. I think listening to what I have to say and consuming the things that I create to be consumed is something that I feel like is a big compliment to me. And I always love to talk about, you know, different things, people's experiences, how I've conceptualized mine, how they conceptualize theirs, and how I've created, you know, different mediums to get that out there. So I think definitely, you know, talking to me about what I've created and talk to me about what you've created, and, you know, we can, like, talk about both of them and, you know, understand, you know, learn from each other, that kind of thing. I think definitely I always love to hear about people's own stories, you know, their own things that they create, their own writings, plays, all of that. So yeah, I think it's just, you know, it's exciting to hear from people and hear about what they have to say as well as what I have to say, and it's exciting for me to share what I have to say as well. So yeah.
That's really beautiful, and thank you for what we have created over the past hour and a half, and I just really enjoyed, again, as I mentioned earlier, your honesty, your vulnerability, and just your energy and enthusiasm and your optimism. I think is definitely very infectious, and I feel like
thank you.
I'm going to spend this weekend thinking more about my passion and how I can live a more flourishing, fulfilling, service-orientated life. So thank you so much for coming down, and a pleasure to chat, and hopefully we can have more in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's honestly an honour to be on your podcast, and yeah, I'm so grateful that you sat down to take this time to speak to me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.